I'm Joe Graedon.
And I'm Terry Graedon. Welcome to this podcast of the People's Pharmacy.
You can find previous podcasts and more information on a range of health topics at peoplespharmacy.com. Have you ever had hiccups you couldn't get rid of? There are lots of home remedies. Maybe you have a favorite to share. This is the People's Pharmacy with Terry and Joe Graedon.
Sometimes we can find a scientific explanation for why a remedy works. At other times, we have to rely on anecdotal evidence. How much does that matter to you?
Muscle cramps are common and painful. Years ago, scientists talked about dehydration and electrolytes, but that didn't explain how a sip of pickle juice could stop a cramp quickly.
Then the science caught up with the coaches.
Coming up on the People's Pharmacy, we'll take your calls about remedies for warts, hiccups, and leg cramps.
In the People's Pharmacy health headlines, COVID continues to surge. The most recent report from the CDC shows that wastewater levels of the virus are very high in 27 states and high in 17 additional states. Surveillance through public health departments and hospitals is limited, but indicates high levels of COVID infection in communities. The KP.3.1.1 variant appears to be exceptionally contagious. That's why people who have evaded COVID until now are coming down with symptoms. This surge is occurring around the world.
When people are congested and coughing, they want relief. A new investigative report from Bloomberg suggests that some house brands of the expectorant guaifenesin may contain a carcinogen called benzene. Guaifenesin is the active ingredient in extended-release brand name Mucinex. This familiar product contains an inactive ingredient called carbamer, made without benzene. Less expensive house brands may be made with cheaper carbamers, and some of them do contain benzene. According to Bloomberg, these generic extended-release mucolytics were found in retailers such as Walgreens, Target, CVS, and Walmart. The FDA has known about the benzene problem for years. It's allowed manufacturers until 2026 to remove this carcinogen from pharmaceutical products.
The FDA recently rejected a new drug application for treating post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. The new medication was the psychedelic drug MDMA, also known by its street name, ecstasy. The company bringing it forward is Lykos, a spin-off from the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. Lykos designed its clinical trials to test whether psychotherapy conducted under the influence of MDMA is effective at treating this devastating condition. However, the agency pointed out that because MDMA has profound effects on mood, cognition, and suggestibility, participants could readily distinguish whether they were getting the drug or a placebo. Interestingly, the FDA was actively involved in the design of the clinical trials it now deems inadequate. In addition, the agency was unconvinced that the benefits of the medication, administered in 3 day-long supervised psychotherapy sessions, outweigh its risks. It's asked the company to conduct another Phase 3 trial if it wants the therapy to be reconsidered for approval.
The FDA has just approved epinephrine in a nasal spray to treat anaphylactic reactions. The medication is called Neffy and is designed for use in people who weigh at least 66 pounds. That includes many older children as well as adults. The Neffy spray has not been tested in people experiencing anaphylactic shock, so it remains to be seen how well it will work in emergency situations. The devices don't require refrigeration and are designed to be portable. Side effects can include sneezing, stuffy or itchy nose, throat irritation, stomachache, dizziness, and nausea.
Erythritol is a popular sugar substitute found in many low-calorie or keto-friendly foods and beverages. The FDA has declared the low-calorie sweetener to be generally recognized as safe. Last year, a large study questioned that assumption when it found a link between high levels of erythritol in blood samples and cardiovascular complications. However, correlation is not causation, so the Cleveland Clinic research team delved more deeply into the issue. One small study published in Arteriosclerosis, Thrombosis, and Vascular Biology demonstrated a big difference in clotting potential between people consuming 30 grams of erythritol and those consuming 30 grams of glucose. Blood levels of erythritol rose about 1,000-fold after consuming it. Every person getting the sugar substitute had an increase in the activity of blood platelets, indicating a higher propensity to form blood clots. People consuming glucose did not experience those changes. And that's the health news from the People's Pharmacy this week. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graedon. I'm a medical anthropologist.
And I'm Joe Graedon. I'm a pharmacologist. Today, we're talking about home remedies, inexpensive treatments you can do for yourself. Hiccups are an area that's rife with remedies. Do you have a favorite? We invite you to join the conversation. Our toll-free number, 888-472-3366. You can email us your favorite hiccup remedy at radio@peoplespharmacy.com.
Later in the show, we'll ask for your wart remedies, and we'll also find out how you deal with painful muscle cramps. But first, we invite you to share your surefire cure for hiccups, if you have one. That number, 888-472-3366. You can also send us email, radio@peoplespharmacy.com.
You know, Terry, about 50 years ago, maybe 53 years ago, I stumbled across a research letter in the New England Journal of Medicine. I think arguably the most prestigious medical journal in the world. And it described a little study titled Granulated Sugar as Treatment for Hiccups in Conscious Patients. Now, I wonder how you would do something like that in unconscious patients.
You don't do this with unconscious patients.
So they had 20 patients who had been hiccuping for days, maybe even weeks, and 19 of the 20 stopped hiccuping after swallowing a teaspoon of granulated sugar. They speculated that the mechanism of action had something to do with stimulating the phrenic nerve, which is the roof of the mouth, which connects to the vagus nerve, and somehow that nerve stimulation interfered with the hiccup reflex mediated by the diaphragm.
Well, mechanism of action it's always intriguing. Sometimes people use mechanisms of action to explain a remedy, and later we have to revise our understanding, right?
We often do, but, I think most healthcare professionals, they'll accept a medication if it has a mechanism of action. How does it work? We want to know how things work. And if we don't know how things work, we kind of go, maybe that's bogus. Maybe it's all placebo. But what do you think? I mean, does a mechanism of action matter to you? Let us know if you need to know how something works, or if you're just, it works. That's good enough for me.
Let's talk to Edward in Charleston, West Virginia.
Hi, Edward. You're on the People's Pharmacy. What home remedy do you have for hiccups?
My home remedy, and I have lived for 70 years, and I've done this since I was a kid, is take a deep breath, hold the breath, close your mouth, and swallow 3 times. And it has always worked for me.
Thanks for that, Edward. We really appreciate that. Joe, did you know that there are actual research articles in the medical literature talking about a breathing technique for hiccups?
No, I've not read that.
Yes, well, that there are. And they have talked about taking in a deep breath and then taking in a little extra. You breathe in as much as you can, and then you breathe in a little bit more, and it seems to stop the hiccups. That sounds like a similar kind of technique to what Edward is suggesting. Thanks for that, Edward.
Again, I think, a lot of those breathing strategies have to do with the diaphragm. If somehow we're impacting the diaphragm, maybe the nerve, maybe that vagus nerve.
The diaphragm is where the hiccup is coming from, isn't it?
I believe so.
All right. Let's go to Blacksburg, Virginia. Aileen, how are you?
Hi, Aline.
So good morning.
Hi, what's on your mind?
I want to tell you my cure for hiccups. I'm a retired school librarian, and I would be telling children a story that they would come to the library, and occasionally a child would start hiccuping. So I would stop the story, and I would say, come here, stand in front of me, and hold my hand. And I would take hold of the child's hands, and I would say, now I want you to slowly count with me from 1 to 10. And that's what we would do. We would slowly, there would be 20 children watching this whole process with great fascination. And then we would slowly count to 10. And when we got through, no more hiccups.
Oh, that's a wonderful remedy.
That's so cool. Thank you for sharing that, Aline. That's really neat. Where to next, Terry?
I think we're going to talk to Mike in Sarasota. Let's see if we can do that.
Hi, Mike. Are you in Sarasota, Florida?
Yes. Hello. How are you all today?
We're doing great. What about yourself?
Not too bad. So I remember seeing an answer a question on Hollywood Squares when I was coming home as a kid years ago for hiccups. You put your thumbs in your ears and your pinkies over your nose, and you take a drink of water and swallow. And I'll be 60 next January. And I've been doing it for quite some time.
Whoa.
So, Mike, we're having a hard time understanding how you take a drink of water if your hands are occupied with your face.
Right. Well, you have a straw handy.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Let me see.
That makes sense.
So you put a straw in a glass of water, and then you put your thumbs in your ears and your pinkies on your nose, and then you drink out of the straw.
She's got it. Or you could take a drink of water and hold it in your mouth, and then put the pinkies in place and the thumbs in place and swallow the water that way.
Thank you for sharing that, Mike. It sounds a little complicated. Do you guarantee this home remedy?
About 90% of the time. Yep.
Yeah, well, 90% is pretty good. Thank you for sharing.
And, Joe, we have email from Joanne who says she has a silly hiccup remedy. It sounds a little bit like Mike's. It works every time, she says. Take a glass of water, hold it with your pinky, ring, and third fingers, and cover your ears with your thumb, your nose with your index finger, and drink as much as you can. So
I'm having a hard time imagining this one.
There you go, like this. But that's going to be very tricky. I'll tell you what, I think all of these are working the same way as the famous hiccup remedy that you demonstrated on television with Diane Sawyer, in which she stood behind you and pressed in on those little flaps of your ears while you drank water. Remember?
Now, what do you call those little flaps again?
The little flaps are called the tragus.
Tragus.
Gus.
Okay. Now, yeah, I wonder how that works. I mean, again, is all this through the nervous system, through the vagus nerve, do you think?
You know, I, unfortunately, as an anthropologist, I do not have the answer to that. All I can tell you is there are a lot of different hiccup remedies, and some of them have a little bit of similarity.
Now, here's one from Diana. And Diana says, from my grandmother many years ago, it always works. A spoonful of peanut butter. Now, we've heard this many times in the past, and some people caution not to do that. But why? What's the matter with peanut butter?
The problem with peanut butter is if your spoon is too big, you might choke on the peanut butter. Whereas if you take
Oh, come
a
on.
dainty spoonful and are careful with it, you are not going to choke. But it probably works on the same principles as the spoonful of granulated sugar.
Stimulating the phrenic nerve, stimulating the vagus nerve. But, a lot of people eat a spoonful of peanut butter. They don't choke and die.
I have watched you do that, actually.
I have been known to do it. It's true.
Should we talk to Benethra in Cessna, Florida?
Yes, indeed. Hi, Benethra.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
We're great. What's up?
Okay, so my 12-year-old son told me this about a year ago, and I now swear by it. You hold your breath 3 times. So you take a breath and hold.
How long?
Squeeze a little bit more out and hold, just for a few seconds.
Okay.
So when you get to that 3rd breath, you try to hold that as long as you can. And I tell you, he told me this about a year ago, and I now swear by it. It has worked every single time.
That's great, Benethra. And one of the advantages is you don't need any props. You don't need sugar. You don't need a glass of water. You don't need the peanut butter. And if it works, that is wonderful.
Well, do you have a hiccup remedy that you haven't heard yet? Give us a call just a few minutes before the break. 888-472-3366. Do you have another email, Terry?
Well, Joe, we have an email from Edith who says, my 8th grade science teacher, Mrs. Bost, used the scare tactic. She would stand at the front of the classroom, put her hands on her hips, glare at the hiccuping student, and say, I dare you to hiccup again. It worked every time. I still remember her, and this after over 50 years. And no, I never had hiccups in her class.
I can understand why. Jean sent this message. I want to share 2 reflex points. For hiccups, point the index finger directly into the skin above the lip, halfway between nose and lip. Point at a 90-degree angle, push firmly, focus on even breathing, and hold till the hiccups subside. And then for muscle cramps, pinch the folds of the Cupid's bow together, the same area between the nose and the upper lip, and breathe calmly till the cramps subside.
That might be kind of a challenge to breathe calmly if the cramp is really painful. We are going to switch gears now. We're going to change from hiccup remedies to wart remedies.
We've collected so many wart remedies over the years, we've kind of lost count. Do you have a wart remedy that helped? We'd love to hear from you. Again, our phone number is 888-472-3366. If the lines are full, email us radio@peoplespharmacy.com.
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graedon.
This podcast is made possible in part by CocoVia, backed by 20 years of scientific research and the maker of the most proven and concentrated flavanol extract in the market today, Coco Pro Cocoa Extract. Cocoa flavanols are among the most studied plant-based bioactives today and are clinically proven to promote cardiovascular and brain health for the long term, supporting a strong heart and better memory.
Get 15% off your order of any CocoVia product by using the discount code PPOD15. Learn more at CocoVia, and remember that discount code is PPOD15.
These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graedon.
And I'm Joe Graedon. The People's Pharmacy is made possible in part by CocoVia dietary supplements. CocoVia Cardio Health is offered in both convenient capsule and powder formats, with each serving containing 500 milligrams of cocoflavanols to support heart health. More information at cocovia.com.
Today, we're talking about home remedies that work. Warts are caused by a virus, but most of the remedies we've heard of don't seem to have antiviral activity.
We would love to hear your story. Our lines are open for your experience and your questions about wart remedies. The number, 888-472-3366. You can email us your wart remedies. radio@peoplespharmacy.com.
Our number again, 888-472-3366. And we're talking to Denny in Binghamton, New York.
Hi, Denny.
Good day.
Good day to you. What's on your mind?
Well, I have a remedy for warts. You break off a leaf of a milkweed plant, and it oozes out a little droplet of milky substance.
Mm-hmm.
Put that on the wart, and as time goes by, maybe 5 minutes, it thickens a little bit, and you can take that same leaf and break another portion of it and add some more of that liquid, and within a day or two, the wart disappears.
No. That's not possible. Within a day or two?
Well, I had a very small one just last week, and I had one not had a wart for 50 years. Maybe it would take a week, but it's very effective. It does work.
We have heard this from other people, so we are delighted that you shared it with us today, Denny.
You know, Terry, it's so interesting that Dr. Lewis Thomas, I think, one of the most prestigious physicians in memory. He was
dean of the Yale Medical School.
Right. He was dean of the New York University School of Medicine, and he was president and CEO of Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Institute. Two of his most famous books, one was called Lives of a Cell, the other was called The Medusa and the Snail. And Dr. Lewis was intrigued by warts. And here's what he wrote in the book Medusa and the Snail. Warts are wonderful structures. They can appear overnight on any part of the skin, like mushrooms on a damp lawn, full-grown and splendid in complexity of their architecture.
And then he went on, the strangest thing about warts is that they tend to go away. Fully grown, nothing in the body has so much the look of toughness and permanence as a wart, and yet, inexplicably and often very abruptly, they come to the end of their lives and vanish without a trace. And they can be made to go away by something that can only be called thinking, or something like thinking.
Well, yeah, it's like somehow the body mobilizes its defense system through, thinking, hypnosis. It's pretty astonishing.
He was specifically talking about hypnosis, and his essay, which I must say I had never read until yesterday, and it is delightful. I really commend it to your attention, but it includes this observation. Not everyone believes this, but the evidence goes back a long way and is persuasive. Generations of internists and dermatologists, and their grandmothers for that matter, have been convinced of the phenomenon. I was once told by a distinguished old professor of medicine, one of Sir William Osler's original bright young men, that it was his practice to paint gentian violet over a wart and then assure the patient firmly that it would be gone in a week, and he never saw it fail.
So there you have it. Warts brought on by a virus. We know that for a fact. Somehow the body is able to mobilize its defenses and fight off that viral infection.
Now, let's talk to Melissa in St. Petersburg, Florida. Melissa, what's your wart remedy?
Hello. Well, I'm 50, and going back to when I was about 8 years old, my grandmother said that you take a piece of bacon, cut off about a 2-inch piece, rub it on the wart, go outside and find a rock and put that piece of bacon under it, and you forget about it. And it always worked. I had, I think, 2 or 3 when I was little, and I've never had one since.
And that is an excellent wart remedy that we have heard before, although we have heard it more often with potatoes rather than bacon. Melissa, thanks so much for sharing your grandmother's wart remedy.
Now, wasn't there a wart remedy in Tom Sawyer?
There was, but I don't remember it. It had something to do with spunk water, and I don't know what spunk water is.
I don't either. I've got an email from Susan. Susan says, when I was a young girl in the late 1950s, the bottoms of both my feet were covered with plantar's warts. It was almost impossible for me to walk in the morning and very, very painful all day. There was an old farmer who lived nearby who was known to be able to cure warts of any kind. He touched each of the warts, and within a week they were gone and have never returned. His price? 10 cents for each wart that went away. I will never forget that old man and feel thankful that there were such healers in our community.
Oh, yes, for sure. And, you know, this goes to the idea of hypnosis in some way, or suggestion, being able to make warts disappear. Let's talk to Lakeisha in Fort Worth, Texas. Lakeisha, how do you get rid of warts?
Hi. I get rid of warts with the emery board. My children came home from school one day and they showed it to me, and I noticed that it was a wart, and I sanded it with an emery board, and it never returned.
Well, thanks so much for sharing that remedy, which is very simple, and it's good to know that it worked.
Terry, there's an email from Julie. Where did she go? I'm finding this in Virginia. Julie was there, and then she disappeared on me. I'll have to find that again. But here's one from Charles and Deanne. I've used a small piece of fresh mullein leaf. Have you ever heard of mullein leaf?
Mullein, yeah.
Mullein. I keep the mullein on with a Band-Aid, change the Band-Aid with a fresh piece of mullein twice a day. I believe it takes a couple of weeks for the wart to drop off. It works for me more than once.
This plant grows wild and has a fuzzy leaf. So, yes.
And here's one. Oil of oregano. I have completely rid myself of numerous warts over the years with oil of oregano. Now, you have to be very careful to use a Q-tip to be sure you only put it on the wart because it will irritate surrounding skin and it will itch a lot when it's disintegrating, which usually takes daily application for about a week. A Band-Aid over the wart will keep the oil from spreading to local skin between applications. You can get oil of oregano from any reputable essential oil company. And that was from, I can't tell.
From Virginia, I think.
Okay.
Let's talk to Kathy in Sarasota.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi, how are you?
We're doing well. Hope you are.
Yes, well, I've been an athlete all my life, so sometimes I think warts are a virus. But I was a gymnast at the University of Florida. I think I got it for the mat or something. Anyway, I put clear nail polish on it, and I think it suffocates it, is what I believe. And it dropped off after a couple of days.
Well, I can't.
I also used compound W. With the plantar's wart, I had to dig into my foot and put a compound W in there, and then it was a real hassle. I had to actually peel away some skin and dig in there, and it was a deep plantar's wart, and I got rid of that like that.
Well, I've heard before this idea of, okay, clear nail polish. The wart won't be able to breathe. but I
The
don't
wart
think
doesn't breathe anyway.
I don't think viruses
So
breathe.
there is some way that this is working, obviously, because Kathy says it works, but it's not through breathing, so we don't know exactly what the mechanism is. It might be the same mechanism as painting gentian violet, which has some antifungal activity, but not antiviral activity. So, Kathy, thanks for sharing that.
Let's go to Danville, Virginia, Terry, because we have an answer to our question.
All right.
Hi, Robert. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. You have something on spunk water.
Yes, it's from a tree, water from a tree stump.
Okay. So as far as
It originally was called stump water, but it got morphed into spunk water, and that's what they use in what Tom Sawyer and Mark Twain said that they should use to cure warts.
So this
I'm
would be
not saying that it works.
this would be the equivalent, basically, of painting gentian violet on it. As long as you believe it works, it'll work.
Well, that would certainly be part of the story. I would think that would definitely be
So
in there.
it has a lot to do with Dr. Lewis Thomas's idea that hypnosis or suggestion, if it's strong enough, can help get rid of warts.
Right. That might be. I'm sure that there are a lot of things that the power of persuasion has hold over. Maybe this is one of them.
Well, Robert, thank you so much for clarifying the nature of spunk water, because I really did not know, and I'm glad to know.
Do you have a surefire wart remedy that we haven't mentioned yet? You can give us a call and share it. 888-472-3366. That number again, 888-472-3366. You can email us your wart remedies, radio@peoplespharmacy.com.
Now, Joe, I want to mention that a few people told us that getting vaccinated against COVID actually made their warts disappear. And one person wrote to tell us that having COVID made a wart disappear. So I don't know how that works at all, but it has something to do with the immune system, I would imagine.
That would be my guess as well.
We have an email from LT who says, recently as I picked up Clorox disinfecting wipes, the writing on the label jumped out at me. Kills 99.999% of bacteria, kills cold and flu viruses, kills this, that, and the other. I wondered if it would work on the recurring wart I have on my foot. I figured it was worth a try. So in the evenings while watching TV, I wipe my feet on top, on the soles, in between the toes, as well as the insides of the shoes I've worn during the day with these wipes. I let it dry and leave it on. Over the past few months, I've noticed a real difference and freedom from this pesky ailment. After trying many other remedies over the years, this one seems to be working. I am elated and relieved. Well, we can't yet say that Clorox wipes is a wart remedy, but it's an interesting thing to try.
What have you tried? 888-472-3366 is the number. If you'd like to share your favorite wart remedy with us, you can email us, radio@peoplespharmacy.com. Again, that number, Terry?
888-472-3366. And Joe, I think it was Kathy who mentioned a plantar wart. They can be very painful. Most warts don't hurt, but plantar warts, because you're walking on them, can be really painful. And you found a wart remedy in the medical literature that works, and it's very simple. The foot soak. Tell us about it.
Right. We heard about this remedy when we were living in San Francisco, and Dr. Dina Dell, who was a good friend, mentioned this on the radio, and it had to do with heat. What he said was you have to soak your feet with the plantar wart in hot water, not so hot that it could burn, but I think it had to be hot enough, like maybe around 110, 120 degrees. And I think it had to be salt water as well. Does that ring a bell for you, Terry?
No, I think it was just water,
regular water.
heated water.
And you had to soak the wart for quite a while, maybe 15, 20 minutes. And he thought that it worked by, somehow affecting the virus that causes warts, and that maybe you could kill the virus with heat, which kind of makes some sense.
Or maybe not kill the virus, but alert the immune system somehow. We always want to make sure, Joe, that home remedies are not doing more harm than good.
Right. We don't want anybody to burn themselves.
We did get an email from Mike in Ithaca, New York, talking about a home remedy we just talked about in the last segment, swallowing a spoonful of peanut butter for hiccups. And he says, my mom doesn't eat peanut butter anymore since she took too big a spoonful, and the only thing that saved her was an alert person in the kitchen with her. Otherwise, she would have choked
So
to
we
death.
shouldn't make fun of
Absolutely
swallowing
not.
peanut butter. It can be a problem for some people.
We have an email from Janice who says, I soaked my foot in Listerine and apple cider vinegar several times a week. The plantar wart I'd had for years disappeared.
Isn't there something about duct tape?
There is. And in fact, it's been studied. And the studies, I must say, have been mixed results. One study showed that putting duct tape on a child's wart worked about as well as freezing it off at the dermatologist's office. And the kids actually preferred the duct tape because it doesn't hurt. Freezing does. Or it can. Then there was another study that said, the duct tape doesn't work all that well. Stick with the dermatologist. So, duct tape can work. It has worked for some people. I don't know if we can say it is a remedy that works. The procedure with duct tape is you put the duct tape on just over the wart. You leave it on for about 5 or 6 days, take it off, soak the wart, file it down, and then reapply the duct tape. Give it about 6 weeks and it should get rid of that wart.
There is now a new product on pharmacy shelves. It comes from Dr. Scholl's. And I think Dr. Scholl's has a wart remedy that involves salicylic acid.
That one's been on the shelves for decades. Yes.
Right. But the new remedy is a freezing remedy.
Yes.
It's actually for skin tags.
Well, there's one for warts and another for skin tags.
And I think you basically just touch the tip of this applicator for a few seconds and it will freeze off the skin tag, and it might even do that for the wart.
Well, there is a product that Dr. Scholl's puts out for warts that is supposed to work that way.
Well, we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to move on to leg cramps and other muscle cramps. Have you ever tried swallowing a spoonful of yellow mustard to stop a cramp? We've got some ideas about how that might work.
And our lines are open for your questions and your stories and your best cramp remedies. 888-472-3366. radio@peoplespharmacy.com. You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graedon.
The American healthcare system is one of the most innovative in the world, but it's also riddled with complex challenges like access to affordable medications and communication barriers.
There's a better way, and that's the name of a healthcare and technology podcast brought to you by SureScripts.
In this podcast, you'll hear from today's most inspiring and innovative leaders in healthcare, with in-depth and personal conversations on the industry's most pressing challenges and how we're navigating them.
There is indeed a better way in healthcare. Subscribe to the There's a Better Way podcast today on your favorite platform.
Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graedon.
And I'm Terry Graedon. The People's Pharmacy is made possible, in part, by CocoVia dietary supplements. CocoVia Memory Plus is formulated with 750 milligrams of cocoflavanols, a level clinically proven to improve 3 different types of memory and support brain function. More information at cocovia.com.
Today on the People's Pharmacy, we're focusing on home remedies that work. Have you ever been awakened with a painful Charlie horse in the middle of the night?
I have, and sometimes that wakes you up too.
It's often after you've been vigorously practicing karate.
Yes, exercise can make you more susceptible, I think, to leg cramps, either while you're doing the exercise or in the resting period after it. If you have experienced leg cramps or foot cramps or toe cramps or hand cramps, tell us how you stop them. You can give us a call at 888-472-3366 or email us, radio@peoplespharmacy.com.
And before we do that, Terry, we did get a message from Betty who says, my plantar warts go away with castor oil. So that is an old-fashioned home remedy. But now we are talking about leg cramps. And Terry, I will never, ever forget our interview with Dr. Bean. Was it Bruce Bean?
Yes.
And he was he at Harvard?
I think so, yes. I believe so.
And
he's a neuroscientist.
He's a neuroscientist, highly regarded, and was he at Harvard or MIT? It was one or the other.
I believe Harvard, but anyway.
He was in Cambridge. He and his colleague were out in ocean kayaks off the coast of Cape Cod, and they developed really severe arm cramps, as I recall, in the middle of the in the ocean.
As one
waves,
might if one were ocean kayaking
for hours and hours, and the waves got kind of rough, and they were curious why they got those cramps, because they were prepared. They had lots of fluids. They had electrolytes. They said we were not dehydrated. We had no problems with our electrolytes. Why would our arms cramp up like that? And they spent the next 10 years working out the physiology and a remedy.
That's right. The remedy they developed, they sell under the brand name Hot Shot, and it has capsaicin in it. It also has ginger, and it has, I think, cinnamon.
I've tasted it. It is not delicious.
It's not something that you just are going to go to for the flavor alone. But the capsaicin, I'll bet, is the most active part of it, although the ginger itself might also work.
And they explain it how, Terry? You are the maven of trip channels.
Well, the interesting thing about trip channels is that scientists didn't know anything about these transient receptor potential channels in human beings until the beginning of the 21st century. So you look in the medical literature, and just at the end of the 1990s, you begin to see researchers writing about trip channels in fruit flies. And then, bingo, amazing. Human beings have them too. Now, these are ion channels in cell membranes. They're meant to be able to pass ions of minerals like calcium, for example, but they are sensitive to heat and cold. So, for example, trip channel M8 is especially sensitive to cold. It also reacts to menthol, which is why mint and menthol feels cooling. How about that? And trip channel V1 is sensitive to heat, but it also reacts to capsaicin, which is the hot stuff in hot peppers. And why do you think we call them hot peppers? Right?
Because they taste hot.
So now you can take that and explain what it has to do with leg cramps.
Well, we now suspect that these TRP, these trip channels in the mouth, in the throat, and in the stomach respond to those flavors that are very strong. And they affect, again, it's a nerve thing. An overactive nerve is what causes those cramps. And when you stimulate the trip channels, you can interrupt that overactive nerve contraction.
Now, there may be some other explanations for cramps, and that would require other types of remedies. Let's talk to Ken in Erie, Pennsylvania.
Hi, Ken. Hello, Ken.
Mountain biking, a long 28-mile overland mountain bike trip, and I was one of the middle-aged guys at the time, and my teenage son and some friends were along. One of the friends, Steve, fell off his bike in front of me, grabbed his leg. I knew what was happening. He hadn't been drinking enough, and his leg was cramping. I shoved his water bottle in his face, and I grabbed his leg and started massaging it. 5 minutes later, we had him back on the bike and completing the ride. But I don't know about all leg cramps, but I think some are caused by physical exertion without adequate hydration.
Ken, I think you're probably right.
You probably are, Ken, and thank you for sharing that. You know, we got a phone call many years ago, Terry, from someone else who was a long-distance bike rider.
Yes, we did. And he was using those little packets of yellow mustard.
Well, speaking of yellow mustard, shall we go to Ed in Lynchburg, Virginia? Hi, Ed. You're on the People's Pharmacy. Hello, Ed. You need to turn off your radio.
Yes, you'll need to turn your radio off.
Hello?
Hi, Ed. Go ahead, please.
How'd you know my name? I didn't tell you my name.
Oh, well, we actually figured that out. We're pretty smart here on the People's Pharmacy. Can you make sure your radio's off?
You're definitely smart.
Yeah.
I never tell you my name as far as I can recall. And I called you in the past, I think, several months back. My question is this, because I know you got a lot of people waiting. When I go to the bathroom, the stool part, for years now, I'd say about 3 years, my mother and grandmother told me when I was a little boy, whatever you do, don't strain when you do the hard thing. So when the big thing comes out okay, but the little thing is the small pieces. I have to strain and strain and strain to get the small pieces out. And I'm saying I'm doing what my mom and grandma told me not to do, and now I'm 81 years old, and I'm still having trouble in the last 2, maybe 3 years.
Well, I'll tell you what, Ed, we were talking about leg cramps, and somehow your call got in there in the middle, and that we're not talking about bathroom problems.
And we actually don't have an answer for you, I'm sorry to say.
Sorry to say we don't, but let's go to Fort Worth, Texas, and talk to Johnny. Johnny, what's on your mind?
Good morning. Hello. I'm talking about cramps, and I started having cramps in my hands, and I started taking. I was taking vitamin D and calcium and vitamin D1 and D3, whichever one it was. But anyway, I started having these cramps. I researched it, but yellow mustard is my number one go-to for cramps. So I started taking the yellow mustard. And I also did some reading, and it turned out that I probably had a lack of magnesium. So the research and 2 different sources said I probably need to start taking some magnesium. They recommended medical, but I couldn't get to that. So I went to the drugstore and I bought a brand name magnesium, and I have not had any cramps. I'm 76 years old. I climb ladders, which I'm not supposed to be doing, but I haven't had a cramp since. So it's magnesium. I cut back on the vitamin, and I also told my cancer doctor about it. And I cut back on the D1 and on the vitamin D and the calcium.
Well, Johnny, thanks so much for your call. And magnesium can. I find that making sure you have enough magnesium on board does help to prevent cramps. It won't do anything for the cramp in the moment. Yellow mustard works great for that, but the magnesium is a good preventive.
888-472-3366 is the number to call if you have a muscle cramp remedy you'd like to share. Have you ever tried soap under the bottom sheet? Has it worked? Did it fail? Give us a call. Let us know your story. 888-472-3366 is the phone number. You can email us radio@peoplespharmacy.com. Terry, we actually think we have an explanation for why soap will work for cramps. And, there was a physician, he was an anesthesiologist, I think, Dr. O.
Yes.
And he was using the ivory soap fragrance.
Yes.
And he would apply it and actually did some experiments with that material. I think it was on gauze pads. Do you remember the details?
Well, basically what he said is that the fragrance was able to stop cramps. Now, he wasn't looking at leg cramps. He was looking at menstrual cramps. But the fragrance did work better than placebo for the menstrual cramps. And unfortunately, he did this research the year he retired, so he didn't follow up on it. And no one else has either. But we suspect that probably some of these plant compounds that are used to make scent actually have an impact on trip channels.
Now, we talked, Terry, not too long ago with a volatile chemist, and he identified one of the ingredients. Was it in ivory soap?
Yes.
And what was the name of that?
Limonene.
Limonene. And limonene is frequently used. I think it may even be in one of the other favorite soaps that people use under the bottom sheet, Irish Spring. And he was convinced that it was the limonene in soap that could be beneficial. And he didn't know exactly how it worked, but he thought it was that volatile limonene fragrance that was the counteraction for the muscle cramps.
Yes, and limonene does have an impact on some of the trip channels, but I don't recall at the moment exactly what it is.
And we got a call once from a fisherman in South Carolina, if I'm not mistaken, who said he got hand cramps, and if he held a bar of soap, the hand cramp would go away.
That's right. Well, let's talk to David in Wheeling, West Virginia. David, you have a cramp remedy.
Yes, hello. Thanks for taking my call. Interesting listening to you all and talking about the mustard packets. I've been a physical therapist and athletic trainer working with sports teams, professional, high school and collegiate, all the way down, and then ultra sports. And one of the things we do is keep mustard packets on the sidelines of games, actually for football in general. But one of the other things that works great is pickle juice, dill pickle juice. If people can take shots of that, they actually sell those now in small 2-ounce shots in stores and things. But I believe it's the vinegar with the electrolytes, the concentration of those things really works magic, and it helps people immensely, especially in the acute phases of cramping.
We agree with you. We think it's the vinegar. I'm not sure that it's the electrolytes. In fact, there's some research from, I think, Brigham Young University showing that it isn't the electrolytes, but it is the vinegar. It does work, and so does yellow mustard.
Well, what's so fascinating is, again, all of these have to do with transient receptor potential channels because the effect is quick. Literally within seconds or within a minute or two. And you couldn't possibly explain that with electrolytes. They just can't undo that muscle cramp that fast.
Quickly. It could work, but it would take much longer.
Exactly.
Let's talk to Mike in Lebanon, Missouri. He has another muscle cramp remedy. Mike, what do you use?
Let me get this down now. I didn't know if I had to turn this one off. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Hello?
Go ahead, Mike. Mike, we can hear you, but you may not be able to hear us.
Well, I'm afraid that's it for Mike.
Yeah, bye-bye, Mike.
So sorry. Mike wanted to tell us about putting magnesium oil on his cramped up leg. Apparently, that's what he uses as a muscle cramp remedy. And Joe, we've been talking about pickle brine, and Kirk emailed to say, in spite of it not being briny, I found that pickle relish works just fine for leg cramps.
Oh, that's fantastic. So there may be something more than just the vinegar.
Yeah.
That is very cool. You know, we aren't supposed to say pickle juice anymore.
I know.
Tell me why.
Someone has trademarked it.
They've trademarked the name
pickle juice. Yes, and they sell it in little bottles.
So what do we call pickle juice if we can't call it pickle juice?
You could call it the liquid from a jar of pickles.
Boy, that's awkward.
It's a little bit longer.
Yeah, and what else do you call it? The
brine, pickle brine. We are allowed to say pickle brine still.
But pickle juice is out.
Yeah.
Because it's trademarked.
Yeah.
And what is it trademarked for?
I think they're selling it as a cramp remedy, perhaps. I mean, we're not going to argue with that part at all.
All right. Well, we have covered a lot of territory today, from muscle cramps and mustard all the way to warts.
Tell us about next week's show, Joe.
Oh, man, next week's show is so cool. It's going to be all about sunshine with Dr. Weller and why sunshine is good for you. Well, that's all the time we have today, Terry.
The People's Pharmacy is a co-production of North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC, with the People's Pharmacy.
Lynn Siegel produced today's show. Pamela Alberta and Ayasi Chinflu provided technical assistance. Al Wodarski engineered. The People's Pharmacy theme music is by B.J. Liederman.
The People's Pharmacy is made possible in part by CocoVia Dietary Supplements, cocoflavanol supplements that support cognitive and cardiovascular health, made with proven concentrated flavanol extract. More information available at cocovia.com.
Today's show is number 1396. You can find it online at peoplespharmacy.com. You can subscribe to our podcast through your favorite podcast provider. We post the show on our website on Monday morning. That's where you can share your thoughts about today's show and share a home remedy. The email address is radio@peoplespharmacy.com.
If you go to peoplespharmacy.com, you could sign up for our free online newsletter. This is an easy way to stay on top of the breaking health news. By subscribing to our newsletter, you also get regular access to our weekly podcast, and you can find out ahead of time which topics we'll be covering.
Now, the article in The Economist for August is titled, Exposure to the Sun's UV Radiation May Be Good for You. Now, of course, don't burn and don't overdo it, but next week on The People's Pharmacy, you'll hear Dr. Weller talking about the value of exposure to sunlight. In Durham, North Carolina, I'm Joe Graedon.
And I'm Terry Graedon. Thank you for listening. Please do join us again next week. Thank you for listening to the People's Pharmacy Podcast. It's an honor and a pleasure to bring you our award-winning program week in and week out. But producing and distributing this show as a free podcast takes time and costs money.
If you like what we do and you'd like to help us continue to produce high-quality, independent healthcare journalism, please consider chipping in.
All you have to do is go to peoplespharmacy.com/donate.
Whether it's just one time or a monthly donation, you can be part of the team that makes this show possible. Thank you for your continued loyalty and support. We couldn't make our show without you.